Hola, fujosis and fudansis todos. Thank you for listening to my talk today. I'm sorry I'm not there in person, either at some great big in-person BL fan event or some queer fan event. I certainly hope to go to Brazil and to go to a BL or other event in the future. I would like to also thank the organizers of this event for inviting me and for helping me to make or help kind of create to support a safe space for Portuguese-speaking fans of BL. I'm going to spend most of my time today talking about the content of this book, Queer Transfigurations, Boys Love Media in Asia, which is a book that I edited and which came out last year. And in the end, I'm going to do my best to answer some questions that were sent to me by the organizers that I think were sent to the organizers from some of you. All right, so let's get started. We all know that BL is popular around the globe, and it's spreading and it's changing as it moves around the globe. While BL can be said to be originally from Japan, it's clearly now a very global genre. We all know that there are many fans of BL in Brazil and that there's an increasingly available selection of officially licensed translations from Japanese, as well as local artists like Johnny Jota or Alec. While BL has many fans in the English-speaking world, of course, perhaps because it's so close to Asia, both in terms of geography and in terms of culture, BL has found a particularly receptive home in many parts of Asia, especially East Asia and Southeast Asia. And in these places, many of you may know, it's kind of taken on new meanings and it's changed in different ways. And the fans are a little bit different. Now, at the same time, I don't want to say that there's a clear distinction between English-speaking fans in the world and fans in Asia or in Portugal, because as you know, as we all know, fans in Asia communicate across national, regional, and cultural boundaries in languages like English, Chinese, and Japanese, and of course, through BL imagery. Now, BL is big business. I don't have global or Asia-specific figures, but in Japan alone, BL is wildly popular, with an estimated annual domestic market size this decade ranging from 21 to 22 billion yen, or around 195 to 200 million US dollars on sales of BL-related manga, light novels, anime DVDs, drama CDs, doujinshi, or doujins, fanzines, video games, cosplay products, and other goods. While this market size estimate has gone up and down, and it's currently increasing a little from a small decline, the 2017 estimate indicates that sales of print BL and drama CDs are a little worrying. But online sales of digital media are not generating as much profit. You make more money off physical books, physical CDs, but the overall market value has been pretty stable, which means that consumption of BL is probably going up a lot. And that's just the market in Japan. Asia is a different story and a different, if overlapping, markets. In July of 2017, I organized a two-day symposium at my own Kanagawa University on BL media spread into East, Southeast, and South Asia, including 24 scholars who came to talk about BL in China, Hong Kong, South Korea, and Taiwan, as well as Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, and India, and of course on Japan. Since the study of BL in Asia was still a very new field in 2017, much of the information and ideas that these scholars shared on these countries 5 years ago, yes, almost 6 years ago now, was presented in an English language academic context for the first time. However, little of that information would have been new to the fandoms of these scholars, or the fandoms that these scholars are researching. And very much like the broader fields of fan and media studies, many of the scholars involved in this project are themselves fans of BL. Although I have to confess, I don't really consider myself to be part of BL fandom. I'm a lot more a fan of BL fans. So several people in this group of scholars are active BL creators, and others organize fan events. The papers presented in 2017 became 2 books. One I've already showed you. The other is BL ga hiraku tobira, henyo suru Asia no sexuality to gender, or BL opening doors, sexuality and gender transfigured in Asia. This book, which came out in 2009, contains 10 of the papers presented at the symposium, plus a few more chapters written by scholars focused on Japan. And the other, Queer Transfigurations, which, like I said, came out last year, has almost all of the papers at the symposium. What I'm sharing with you today is an extended version of the introduction to both of these books. Several of the contributors to this project have also written, edited, or contributed to other books on BL in English in Asia, and there are many more academic books in Japanese. And an increasing number of Japan-based scholars have also started researching BL outside of Japan, including people with whom I'm working. Now, I'd like to talk to you about the title of Queer Transfigurations. As you probably know, even though the genre focuses on male-male romance and sex, the majority of fans and creators involved in BL fandom in Japan, elsewhere in Asia, and around the world, including in Brazil, are heterosexually identified cisgender girls and women. That's the majority, not everybody. But even though that's the majority, it's still a very queer space. Now, in Queer Transfigurations, the chapter authors and I use queer to talk about gender and sexuality related expressions that question or challenge social norms. So from its origins in the shoujo culture of the 1970s, the creation and distribution of content depicting male-male romance and sexuality for cisgender heterosexual girls was a deliberate effort to challenge, or we could say queer, norms for female sexuality. Moreover, even though it was not originally intended to promote or encourage homosexuality or gender experimentation among readers, some individuals who are not necessarily cisgender or straight have found room to breathe in this media and the sphere of its fandom. And in that sense, we could say that BL is queer twice over, that there is no clear line in BL or between BL and LGBTQ media makes BL even more queer. The erasure outside of Japan of the line between BL and LGBTQ media and fans continues, this erasure of that line, it continues to exist in Japan. And that's one of the many ways that BL has been transfigured across Asia. I use the word transfigurations in the title of this book and in some of my other writing, not to reference the magic of Harry Potter, because we all know what's wrong with J.K. Rowling, but to point to change in transit from one culture to another. I began to use this term to talk about the context of Japan to avoid words like localization, globalization, cultural hybridization, and transculturation. In academia, in universities, among scholars in particular, these terms are rooted in the post-colonial experience, and they often imply massive imbalances of power or unidirectional, one-way flows of culture. Well, Japan's relationship with the West, especially the United States, has never been especially equal. It wouldn't be accurate to frame the Japanese experience as post-colonial, at least not primarily. To be sure, under the kind of rubric or the label Cool Japan, the Japanese government has actively used its popular culture as a kind of soft power through which Japan could more softly assert its influence around the world, including in Asia. And of course, the countries that I will be talking about here can largely be described as post-colonial, and a majority of them were in fact colonized or at least occupied by Japan. But let's think about this. The circulation of BL, which is a very minor, and in many parts of Asia, it's still an underground genre. The circulation of BL and the ways that BL has been transformed by fans and creators often runs against what we might expect about how a post-colonial people might kind of engage with or react to the culture of their former colonizer. Accordingly, scholars Ling Yang and Yanri Xu, who are two of the most prominent scholars of Chinese BL, or Danmei, describe the circulation of BL in the context of China as a kind of cultural globalization from below. Similarly, Andrea Wood has described BL fandom as a global counterpublic. Well, Wood was primarily focused on English-speaking fans. Her description applies to fandoms in Asia. And fans in Asia are aware of their status as members of a BL fandom and their role, the role their participation in that fandom plays in how their own identities are formed and transformed. So I'd like to use the remainder of my talk now and to think about the issues that are raised by the spread of BL around Asia. So I see four major overlapping themes that these studies of BL and media fandoms draw attention to. And these are themes that I've already started to suggest. The first is that BL is a transnational media phenomenon. Second, BL is a useful tool for unsettling gender and sexual norms. Third, BL is unavoidably linked to LGBTQ issues, including politics. And that leads me to the observation that BL is political. And if you're already familiar with studies on BL in Japan, and as you may know, I've been very much involved in studies of BL in Japan. These four themes, they're not really surprising. What fascinates me, however, and what I think these studies on BL in Asia make clear is how the impact of BL media and fandoms manifest, or they appear in new and sometimes kind of unexpected ways as they move around and are transformed or transfigured across Asia and beyond. Okay, so let's think about transnational BL. So BL is fundamentally transnational and transcultural media. And this is true for BL in Brazil. It's also true for BL in Asia. And this is even true in the context of Japan, where BL's earliest appearance in the form of shoujo manga was building on layers of transnational, transcultural borrowing and transfiguration that go back to the Meiji period. In Queer Transfigurations, I describe the invention of BL as the result of the transfiguration of the coming of age stories of authors like Hermann Hesse and other European literature and films about coming of age. And all of this is to say nothing about the ways that gender and sexuality in Japan, the ones, you know, that it was in the 1970s, that this too was really created through local culture engaging with overseas culture. So, so I'd like to suggest that BL in Asia is a great way to look at the ways that BL media is part of the processes where through which local understandings of gender and sexuality in Asia are being changed, they're being reconsidered, they're being reshaped. So now in most cases, BL media seems to have first been imported physically or digitally from Japan into other Asian countries in the form of manga, which was often translated by fans. Given its geographic and cultural closeness, it's unsurprising that BL seems to have made its way into East Asia first, by the late 1980s, if not sooner. We don't have concrete evidence of the exact time that BL entered countries like Taiwan. It may have entered Taiwan as late as the 1970s in the form of pirated translations of commercially published shoujo manga, and as late as the 1980s in the form of translations of Japanese doujinshi, or doujins, featuring homoerotic narratives based on popular shonen manga such as Saint Seiya, which you can see on the screen. And this is talked about by Pei Wang in her chapter in this book. In South Korea, the 1980s saw the emergence of a culture around the production and consumption of what they call tonginji, which is basically doujinshi. Rather than a parody of a shonen work, a pirated version of Minami Ozaki's highly popular BL manga Zetsuai in 1933 helped to spark a boom in yaoi, which is, I think you all know, in Japanese, an older label for BL that is no longer really used in Japan. You all know that it's still being used outside of Japan. So BL has figured prominently in webtoons, which I think many of you are aware of and probably read, as well as online fan fiction and novels. And this is talked about by Jungmin Kwon in her chapter. So Ling Yang and Yanri Xu, who I already mentioned, date the introduction of pirated BL into China around the same time, the early 1990s, which is a period that saw the influx or the entry of many kinds of manga from Japan. In China, male-male romance created by and for women and members of the LGBT community, including BL of Japanese origin or inspiration, has generally been referred to as danme, which is the Chinese pronunciation of the Japanese word tambi, which has been used in the past as a label for BL. Tambi means something like aesthetic. And that's probably how it entered Chinese. While in Japan, manga is the most visible and abundant form of BL, in China, online prose fiction is the biggest form of danme media. Now, the community of fans and creators of online danme fiction includes people in mainland China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, as well as Chinese-speaking communities elsewhere. In her chapter in this book, Asako Saito looks at how narratives can be written and rewritten as they move around East Asia. And she's looking specifically at contemporary BL retellings created and circulating based on the 3rd and 14th century Three Kingdoms legend. So she talks about how these BL doujinshi are based on the Japanese video game Dynasty Warriors, or Shin Sangoku Musou, which was first released in 1997, and which itself is an example of how culture is just moving around. She says that locally created BL versions of the Japanese game then get translated and move from one culture to another. And this kind of intensifies, it strengthens the way that BL is moving around. And it's connecting BL fans between China, Japan, and Taiwan. And this makes it really difficult to categorize these communities as separate. And it makes it difficult to think of these texts as coming from one specific place. So demonstrating the many layers of transnational flows that go into cultural products, in the 2000s, China saw the introduction of English-speaking slash fiction, or English language slash fiction, in which male couples are paired or slashed into romantic relationships. In many countries, we call this shipping now. And so Xu and Yang talk in their chapter about how Harry Potter and Pottermania first took off, and then later the BL versions of the BBC drama Sherlock became popular. Now, they talk about how in China, fans are basically divided into 3 circles called chuan in Chinese, based on their focus. So original Chinese danmei fiction, Japanese works, and Euro-American slash fiction. And the result is that the broad category of danmei is no longer equal to what we used to think of, or people in China used to think about as BL from Japan. And so this category itself has changed. So this blurring, or this kind of lack of clarity, lack of clearness, including, you know, the increasing popularity of Omegaverse fan fiction. You know, even if we ignore this for a minute, the Japanese origin of BL is changing in other ways in other spaces. So while in Vietnam, translated danmei fiction has apparently taken over, it's become stronger than Japanese BL. As Kang Byung-Chu Dredge observes, he talks about it in his chapter, Thailand has since really about 2015-16 been playing a role in BL fandom regionally. And so it's kind of become a center of BL, where BL is changed from Japan, and then it is consumed in China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, and South America, as well as Korea and Japan, which in the case of Thailand, Korea and Japan kind of mixed together among many fans. So according to the history of BL that's traced by Puin Bunawechevin in his chapter, BL seems to have come to Thailand by the late 1980s, which is around the same time again as Taiwan and similar to Korea. And it might have started with an unlicensed or pirated translations of Aoki Yasuko's long-running From Eroica with Love, or Eroica Yuri Ai o Komete, which was first published in the Thai language, again, without a license, around 1987. Thai publishers, in fact, didn't start licensing BL until around 2010, when this is kind of a reaction to lawsuits for more mainstream publishers in general, who like manga publishers in Japan, who are suing the publishers in Thailand for pirating mainstream works. The first licensed translation might have been Takahashi Mako's Donut Letter, which I think is on the right of this slide. Since then, as you know, BL Media has gone crazy. And so it's gotten to the point where, you know, there are so many series that are coming out each year, not just by one TV production company, one video production company, but by many, many. So in recent years, Thomas Bodnett has argued that the historically Japanese pop cultural phenomenon of BL has become dislocated or moved from Japan, and among some fans, it's come to be seen as a Thai phenomenon, and this is, for example, among Philippine fans, at least among gay Philippine fans. BL in Thailand can also be seen in the emergence of new forms of fandoms of minor celebrities, including fandoms of actual gay couples, including couples who are part of cover dance groups performing covers of K-pop group dance performances. So you've got K-pop, which is influenced originally by J-pop, but has become its own thing. You've got BL, which is being originally coming from Japan, but being consumed and changed in Thailand. So you have this fan community that's looking at these actual gay couples who are performing cover dances of K-pop, and then they develop fandoms. And then if you look on the screen, and this is an old Facebook page on the right, but you can see that the fans of these actual gay couples are they're also spreading around. So BL culture is just moving and moving in circles in many exciting kinds of different ways. So I want to move on and then talk about BL as a tool for rethinking gender and sexual norms. So BL has always been about unsettling or challenging gender norms. In the early 1970s, BL, which was called Shonen Ai, which means love by or for boys, was created by a new generation of young women and artists as part of an effort to raise commercially published shoujo manga, which had used to be drawn by male artists, into a mature, more literary art form. So BL, or Shonen Ai, was created because of the rigid patriarchal norms that restricted or limited gender and sexual expression of adolescent girls and young women. So alongside normative narratives about romance between a girl and a boy set in Japan, we started to see these new kinds of narratives, often set in Europe or in history or both. But by the mid-1970s, we started to see fans coupling their favorite rock stars or characters from even shonen manga and anime. So drawing on research by Nagakubo Yoko, another scholar and critic, Fujimoto Yukari, talks about how the practice of coupling, or ship in Japanese, or shipping in English and many other languages, actually shows how gender and how gender is relative. So for example, if we take this, if we take one seme and one uke, and then we remove the uke and pair the seme with someone else, we can see that he is less or more masculine depending on who we ship him with, right? So these seme and uke characters are kind of gender ambiguous. They're kind of gender unclear. And we can see this going on in this kind of gender androgyny, this awareness in fans around Asia. So for example, in a chapter on the Philippines, Tricia Fermin shows that middle-class fans, they see the androgyny of the male characters as giving like kind of an alternative model, not just of what men should be like, but also masculinity. And this gives these female fans a way to rethink this kind of gender inequality, gender essentialism, and conservatism, all of these things. Similarly, in another chapter, Xilin talks about what is a genre in China called hugongwen, which is coupling two gong or seme characters. And this shows another kind of equality within male-male relationships. And other artists, so in other genres, sometimes challenge these norms in other ways. So Christine Michelle Santos, you might know her as Kirsten Santos, if you follow her on Twitter. Christine Michelle Santos talks about Malaysian artist Penguin Frontier, who in, for example, Faker's Affair, reverses the roles of the coupling toward the end, which suggests that gender and sexuality both might be a little bit flexible. So, and Kazumi Nagaike looks at fudanshi, or male fans, in Hong Kong, Japan, and Korea, and she says that for some of these fans who are heterosexual even, this male-male coupling, this male-male romance offers them a chance to fantasize in a way that allows them to escape gender and sexual norms and the pressure they feel about masculinity. In this kind of aesthetic of male-male romance also works in other cultures. So for example, among urban young people in China, Wei Wei talks about in his chapter in this book, you can't really have overt imagery of BL or homosexuality, but fans have developed a kind of heightened sensitivity, an increased sensitivity. And we can see this in, for example, the Gaoji meme that is circulating in China, where people kind of see a relationship where it might not exist, or there are actually heterosexual men who take this and they use the idea of jiu, or kind of gay buddies, gay friends among heterosexuals. They're not gay, probably, but they use this this concept to kind of to explain this closeness. And this makes it possible for them to express closeness because they turn it into kind of a joke, but then they get to be close to each other, which is kind of nice. All right, now I want to move on and talk about how BL is queer in terms of LGBTQ rights. So, well, it's important to remember that until recently, male characters in same-sex relationships in BL were usually both straight, or at least one of them was straight. And this didn't matter how graphically, how sexually their relationships are being depicted. But, you know, if we look at historically in Japan, fans have long kind of blurred gay and straight in their own imaginations. On the screen there's a letter to the gay magazine Barazoku, where fans of Shonenai or BL are writing in to talk about how much they love BL. They're writing to a gay magazine. Now, Japan's lack of a strong traditional religious prohibition against homosexuality has frequently been used as an explanation for relative openness to homosexuality. But taboos in Japan related to being homosexual or transgender, they're based in a sense of going away from cultural norms rather than sin. Now, BL was and is to a certain extent taboo. So it's not so much in Japan, it's taboo still to some extent, not because it's focused on male-male sexuality, but because the content is focused on sexuality at all, and it's produced by and for women who are actively sexually objectifying men. Things are different in other countries. So for example, in Indonesia, as Gita Pramudita Pramsawari has talked about, or she talks about in her chapter, BL is often the first time that young middle-class, university-educated women even think about or come into direct contact with the idea of homosexuality. When LGBT issues come up in public discourse, it's usually treated with hostility as well as religious condemnation. Now, and of course, pornography is banned. And it's in this context that BL circulates online. And in her chapter, Kanya Arini Sukocho talks about it manages sometimes to hide in plain sight at conventions. BL fans in Indonesia are split roughly in half. Pramsawari talks about in her chapter between those who feel a conflict about their fandom of BL, and they try to keep it separate from real LGBT issues. So there's one half. And then there are those who try to at least be aware of LGBT issues when they are consuming or creating BL. And Pramsawari said that some fans told her that BL encouraged them to reconsider their own religious values about homosexuality based on the attachment that they started to feel towards male-male couples. So in her own study of India's tiny BL fan community, Lakshmi Menon sees a similar kind of thing happening. It's important to keep in mind, however, that the women with whom Menon spoke are usually middle or upper middle class, well-educated women who are fluent in English. So just like fans in Indonesia, they aren't representative of the Indian population at large. So many of these fans in India, they call themselves Fujoshi or Fujo, say that BL increased their awareness of LGBT issues. In some cases, it made them aware of gay men in the first place. So Menon writes in her chapter that through an engagement with both BL and subsequently with the real issues of the queer community in India, readers have been able to develop an understanding of the fact that the representations of BL in manga tend to be stereotypical or idealized. So in other words, they're coming to an awareness of the problem that's been pointed out by other scholars and activists, that where BL has the potential to be seen as kind of stealing images of gay men. So, and this argument dates back at least to the early 90s in Japan, the early 1990s. So, and if you look on the screen, you can see an effort by Parvati Menon, who happens to be Lakshmi Menon's sister. She's trying to show a kind of coupling across religious and cultural backgrounds as well. On the other hand, some BL fans have taken an awareness of this connection, and they've applied it to get involved in LGBTQ activism. And this is talked about in Peti Wang's chapter. So Peti talks about how these activists are involved in, they were involved in the fight for same-sex marriage and under the banner of Funyu, which is a Taiwanese word or Taiwanese or Chinese word for Fujoshi. I want to, since that brings us kind of to politics, I want to move on to politics. So in Japan, in Japanese BL, you rarely see any connection, any direct connection to anything political. When I looked on Pixiv for Abe Shinzo and BL, I found the images you can see on the screen. And I looked when Abe Shinzo was the prime minister. But this is rare. We don't normally talk about politics in fan communities in Japan. In general, if there's a discussion of politics, it's about censorship and concerns about censorship related to pornography or copyright. Those are the primary political things that people are concerned with. But this isn't true everywhere. So in Korea, for example, we start to see BL as being used as a safe space for gays and lesbians. But what is more interesting is that BL became a site of a battle between Korean male otaku and Fujoshi. So for example, there is a voice actor, Kim Ja-young, who was a voice actor. She was a voice actor for video games, and she tweeted once, "Girls do not need a prince." And she's got a quote from Star versus the Forces of Evil, "I don't need a hero, I need a friend." But this little simple thing led to this huge boycott, and it led to Kim Ja-young being fired. And after that, these male otaku started to report BL fan events as pornography. So they risked exposing the entire fan community because some women said that maybe we don't need a man. So they risk giving up their own pornography. More recently, there has been a movement online to do what is called tarubieru, or giving, sorry, I'm speaking Japanese, not Korean, talbiel, to leave, or in Japanese, datsu BL, like leaving BL. And the criticism of BL in this case is that BL presents an overly beautiful image compared to the realistic world of actual homosexuals. And so instead of saying this is exploiting homosexual, or this is exploiting gay men, for example, this is exploiting LGBT people, they're saying that it's gay sex is disgusting. And so this is kind of an unusual attack that Hyojin Kim talks about in her chapter. Finally, now we're looking at a little bit more than almost 10 years ago. You might be aware of the umbrella movement in Hong Kong, where young people were fighting for, not just young people, but young people and older people were fighting to save democracy in Hong Kong. And what we saw happening, this is talked about by Katrine Jacobs and in her chapter, what happens is that some of the activists, they combined their politics with BL, and so they started shipping the young men who were leaders of the youth movements, and so they also started shipping older activists, trying, in videos and in drawings and in photographs. So they brought BL into this politics to kind of create a lighter sense of the movement, to kind of like bring joy. We've got our own local BL. All right, so basically we can see from, and I went too fast and I'm sorry, I hope that you have a chance to read this book and get a richer sense of all of the chapters. But we can see that BL is transnational. We can see that BL helps to question or challenge gender and sexual norms. And we can see then that BL is queer, and that BL can't be separated from LGBT rights. It can't be separated from LGBT culture. And it can't be separated from activism that supports these rights. And so in that way, BL is political. And so that idea brings to my mind the feminist slogan, "The personal is political." And this slogan first appeared in 1970, which is the same year as BL. And so when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the level of the text, the BL text, the artist, the BL artist, the fan, the BL fan, whether you're in Taipei or Tokyo, Beijing or Bangkok or Brazil, whether these images, they're circulating or communicating online or somewhere else, when it comes down to the ways that BL can encourage people to rethink their lives and the world around them, BL, it is really kind of personal too. So I'm going to end with that, and then I want to move on to talk about the questions that were sent to me in advance by the organizers of this marvelous event. Okay, so Maristella writes, first of all, if you allow me, I'd like to thank Mr. Welker. When a few years ago, he kindly sent me some of his research by email so I could study. I will tell you that many scholars are happy to share works. I'm not going to send you the whole book, but if you want something that I've written, an article or a book chapter that I wrote myself, I'm happy to send it if you can't get it for free through a university or other library, because we need people to request those books so that the librarians buy them. All right, so Maristella goes on, I was surprised when I heard about this lecture, which is this, and the question is, how do you think the diffusion or spread of the term yaoi happened in the West instead of the correct, quote unquote, correct terminology BL? And how do you think it affects or is tied to the perception of the Western fandom has of the genre? That's a great question. So shonenai is the first term that was widely used about the genre. Bishonen was also used. Bishonen means beautiful boy. Shonenai means boy love, love of boys, love by boys, love for boys. And then yaoi took on, it became popular in the amateur scene. And in the word appeared around 1979, and it became popular over the 1980s. BL began at the 1990s, and it was originally connected with commercial BL, but the terms have never been as separate in Japan as they have been by fans overseas. I have a feeling that because yaoi was still used widely in the early 90s, that it became associated with early BL. And then later on, somebody looked back and they had the idea that BL in the beginning was not pornographic. So they said this early BL is shonenai, because that word was connected to early BL. And then yaoi is everything else, but then we start to see this less pornographic, but still kind of sexy BL that is connected with the commercial, sorry, the word BL gets connected with this commercially published work. So I have a feeling it's just about the introduction. Personally, as long as people are aware that the words don't mean the same thing in Japanese, hentai does not mean the same thing in Japanese, that's fine. Just be aware of that. You can use, fans get to choose their terms, right? Okay, let's go on. Anonymous writes, as a lesbian, the main reason I like reading BL is being able to read about romance and enjoying it as an observer without seeing myself in the characters as I do when I read GL. But at the same time, I can identify with the work because it's not far from a reality as straight romance works are. And I want to know if my cases like mine are common among Fujins. I think fans don't necessarily know why they like some things. You're able to say, this is why I like this, because it's not straight. So I can sort of identify with it, but I don't have to identify too closely. Some people really aren't able to say that as clearly, but I think it's fairly common. If you look at Mizoguchi Akiko, who's one of the most prominent scholars of BL in Japan, she has written many times, and she said many times that she became a lesbian through reading BL in the 1970s. And as in the book Kazumi Nagaike talks about, even straight men, some of them enjoy BL because it takes off the pressure. There are also straight men I've talked to who like GL because there's no men, so they don't have to identify with a male character and they don't feel pressure. They can just enjoy romance or sex indirectly. Okay, so another anonymous writes, I really wanted to ask someone who has more experience why it's so rare to see reverse couples in BL. That's a good question. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I don't know. I need to think about it more, and honestly, I did not prepare answers. Maybe if you tweet at me or I get asked that at some other question, I will maybe have a better answer, but I just don't have an answer right now. I'm sorry. Ane writes, how did you react as a man when you first had contact with the world of BL? Because most men are disgusted or weirded out by this genre. Weirded out? Maybe. I was never disgusted because these guys are hot and clearly, well, anyway, they're hot. But I was surprised. But then I started to do research and I became able to better understand why some people like the genre. And now I don't think anything other than if I like the art, like Penguin Frontier, whose art you can see there on the screen, then I think it's either sexy, hot, cool, or boring, but I don't really think anything. But in the beginning, I think I was just surprised. Andressa M writes, James, your work is incredible. Thank you. Your last book has collaborators from multiple areas. I'd like to know if you are thinking about expanding this research and collaborating with scholars from other places, such as Latin America, for instance. So I've been working with Fujimoto Yukari and Kazumi Nagaike and Ishida Hitoshi on a government-funded project where we've been looking around the world at BL and Yuri and other kinds of queer manga, etc., and the relation with local LGBT cultures. As part of that, I've gone to BL fan events in Mexico City twice, and in Monterrey, Mexico once. We applied for money to go to Latin America, including Brazil, but we didn't get the money this time, but we're hoping to do it later. I've been in contact with scholars from Brazil, Mexico, Peru, Argentina, at least. And so we hope to do something else, but there's all kinds of room for, I think, a lot of scholars coming from Latin America who speak either Portuguese or Spanish way better than my zero. So hopefully more will come out locally as well. And I have another Andressa, M. Do you read BL manga outside of your work as a researcher? If you do, which one is your favorite? I don't. I don't. Normally, although, yeah, I don't have, yeah. I really like classic BL. I originally started as more of a historian focused on the 1970s and 1980s, and I really like The Heart of Toma no Shinzo, and The Song of the Wind and the Trees. The Song of the Wind and the Trees has not been published in English, at least not yet. There is a Spanish version, and I think it's really cool. Otherwise, to be honest, I should have prepared. I could grab off my shelf. But I like, my favorite work that I have seen or read in the last few years is Shimanami Tasogare, Our Dreams at Dusk in English, but I don't remember the title. It's definitely been translated into Spanish and probably Portuguese by now. Yes. Alice asks, what's an interesting fact you learned within the book Queer Transfigurations? I hope that I have shared a lot of those with you. Everything I said earlier, I find really interesting. That's why I put it in the in this talk. So, all right. I'd like to know the most interesting similarities and differences you noticed as a researcher in the works produced in different Asian countries, especially Japan, China, South Korea, Thailand. I don't think there's anybody, well, I can think of one person possibly, but nobody's doing this comparative work. So because I don't think anybody, well, I don't think there are many people who can read all of these languages or understand all of these languages deep enough to do like a textual analysis. So I guess I was surprised initially that BL in China is primarily textual, it's primarily words, but it makes sense because it's easier for words to circulate online. It's easier to use code words, it's easier to spread BL this way. Thailand, the explosion of Thai BL is not something that I expected. I didn't expect Thai BL to become popular in Japan, but it really truly has. It's a smaller fandom, but it exists. Thai BL stars have come to Japan and they've had really large fan events. So yeah, that's not answering the differences. Yeah, I mean, otherwise, so Korea is also a manga or manhwa culture. So there's a lot of, at least fan-produced manga or manhwa. Thailand, because there isn't the same tradition of this style of art, there's very little locally produced manga. I think that that's something else, and so to keep in mind, and that's perhaps related a little bit to why BL in drama form has taken off so much. What's my opinion on BL being seen as inferior to actual LGBTQ works due to the fact that the public is composed mainly of women who are supposedly cis and straight? I don't personally think that BL is inferior. It's different, but not so different. I don't think you can draw a line between BL and actual LGBTQ works. I spent a long time thinking about the 1970s in Japan and why BL appeared in the first place. And I have a lot of sympathy for the women and girls at that time who really had no other, they didn't have good outlets for thinking about gender and sexuality. So even if I thought BL was wrong, I don't, but even if I did, I would have a lot of sympathy at the time. And I do today, especially in really conservative countries. But beyond that, I just disagree. I don't think it's inferior. I think it's different. Deborah writes, what are the difficulties you faced as someone researching BL and Asian queer media? Initially, it was hard to really talk to fans, especially when I started out as a graduate student. And I was starting researching history. But in general, traveling around globally now, fans are incredibly welcoming. And that makes me happy. I was really afraid that fans they would not want an outsider coming into their space. But that really hasn't been the case. I've been welcomed at many different BL fan events and Yuri fan events to give talks. And so the I guess at this point, the difficulties would be language when I'm going to a country where I can't use English or Japanese. And hey, I've run out of time. And so I'm going to end there. Obrigado a todos. I don't speak Portuguese. I apologize. But thank you so much for this opportunity. I welcome contact from you on Twitter. I can't promise I will reply right away, but I would love to hear from you. And that's all. So see you.